It's another episode of the Public Therapy Podcast with your host, Chris.
And Ray.
All right, today we have with us author and public speaker Gordon Corsetti. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you both for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for making time, by the way. But everything is going good in your life right now, as far as I know. COVID and all the other stuff is wrecking everyone's plans and stuff they had this year. But everything's good.
Yes, putting that up on the shelf. Everything is all right. Family's healthy, friends are healthy, and life's moving along. Just working with all the restrictions we got to work around. So,
yeah.
Well. How about you two?
We're doing pretty good. We looking forward to the holidays. I guess more so being off more than anything next week. So it'll be kind of cool. Being able to. Not that we don't spend enough time together already, but it's nice because we teleworking for the most part. So. Mm-hmm. It'll be nice not having to open up that laptop, waking up early for no reason and stuff. So not for no reason. I shouldn't say that, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So where are you from?
So I'm from Roswell, Georgia, originally, and been actually recently moved back there from Baltimore, Maryland, where I was up for work for a good number of years, but back in Georgia with my immediate family and friends.
Okay. So you born and raised in Georgia?
Born in Jersey, raised in Georgia. It's nice northern flair and southern styling.
Okay. So. Got it. All right. Cool. So today we're going to talk about mental health, more so I'll put in quotation mental agility, because this is my first time hearing those two words put together. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about that. But before we jump into that, I'd like to learn a little bit more about yourself. So we know where you're from. So what's your story? What's your background?
Sure. So... my story is very much intertwined with lacrosse, with sports, be it as a player, as a coach, and now as a referee, which I've been for the last 15 years. But I got my start playing in a local youth league that my family ran and continued to run for about 25 years after that. It started in the early 1990s. Played lacrosse there, continued to play lacrosse through high school. But it was in high school around 15 or 16 where I started to, I call them whispers. It wasn't like I was hearing another voice, just internally I was having some thoughts that were popping into my brain that didn't feel like mine, and I also didn't know how to deal with. So thoughts about worthlessness, thoughts about being a burden to my family, friends, and the people that cared about me. And then as that developed over time, as I got more into my senior year of high school and then going into college, it got into more serious and horrific terms of wanting to end my life by suicide, wanting to harm myself. And those became thoughts I had to deal with on a day-to-day basis, some days hour to hour, minute to minute on my worst days, for about the time from I was about 15 to 19, which was when I was in my period of being untreated. Mm-hmm. And I was untreated because I didn't realize that I had a diagnosable mental illness. I didn't realize I had major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and those manifest in an extreme form to suicidal ideation and attempts. So that was my early introduction to realizing that the brain isn't always your best friend, and that I wasn't necessarily my mind. Mm-hmm. And then as I got into treatment, starting with medication and psychotherapy, that was as my family was realizing and I was coming to them that things were wrong, right? I started getting onto medication regimens from my psychiatrist, seeing a regular psychotherapist and practicing cognitive behavioral therapy. That's still kind of my backbone, which I've built all my other tools and techniques and strategies off of. But what wound up happening is my story is very similar to a lot of other folks who take psychiatric medications. Is I started feeling better, so I stopped it. And I'd feel okay for a couple of months, and then I would dive into this awful hole, and that would lead me to a suicide attempt. That would lead me to the hospital, and it would lead me to getting on a new medication regimen. And that cycle repeated itself several times through my early and mid-20s until I was most recently now, I'm 32 now. I had several years of stability from about 26 to about 31. Mm-hmm. Which I was very pleased with. And I kind of felt like I had gotten over the hump of things. And to bring things a little bit more into the present, last November, I had been home for 6 months. I intentionally moved back to Georgia to be close to my family and my friends and the places that have deep meaning to me. And I had a great paying job, great times with a girlfriend, lots of family time. Everything in life was going great. And as I explained to folks, There's no such thing as good stress or bad stress to your brain. We know it as distress and eustress, but your brain just registers it as stress. So even though I was having these great experiences and things were flying high, my brain was like, whoa, something's going off. And I was torpedoed. It wasn't a suicide attempt, but I did wind up back into the hospital again with, again, those thoughts. And the doctors, I was at Emory, their psychiatric facility called Wesley Woods. And the doctors there said, hey, you've tried all these medications and therapies, and you've done a lot of work to try to keep yourself ahead of this. Would you be interested in trying electroconvulsive therapy? And I said, I told a room full of doctors with medical degrees to go F off.
Yeah. What you call it? What kind of therapy?
It's called electroconvulsive therapy.
Electroconvulsive. Oh, I think I've seen that on some movies or something crazy. Yep. Like
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is the one that always comes back to that. Jack Nicholson getting fried by a whole bunch of actors.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I remember from. Yeah.
Or A Beautiful Mind also. Same deal on that one. So it's not as it's portrayed. That may be how it was performed back in the day, but it is it is a remarkably safe procedure now with about an 80% efficacy rate across populations. And I was I was lucky to be in that 80%, that it was tremendously effective for pulling me out of a depression rapidly. And the side benefit to that was that, so for, again, the majority of my adult life, I had dealt with a suicidal thought every single day since, let's just call it, since I was 20, right? Let's just say that.
Wow.
So at least one a day, and if not more, right? Since that treatment of, I had, I think 10 or 11 total sessions. Since that treatment, those thoughts are extraordinarily far away from me mentally. I've gained a lot of distance, and the frequency and intensity of them has diminished significantly. There have been weeks that have gone by where I haven't had a suicidal thought, which is still a very novel experience for me. And that has led me now about a year from that experience and a more in-depth treatment protocol where I learned dialectical behavioral therapy, which was another batch of tools to add to my toolkit and my strategy guide for depression and anxiety and suicidal ideation, and just general life skills as well.
Right.
And now I'm continuing my mental health advocacy, and now I've switched careers. I got out of an office job, or now a home office job, if you will, into electrical line work, which parlays into my officiating. When COVID hit and I left my job, and I kind of stepped back for the summer and be like, how do I want my life to be? I don't care like money wise or anything like that, but it's just, I'd like to go home happy at the end of the day. Yeah. And the people that I know in this industry say that this is the effect of that work. And refereeing keeps me outside, it keeps me active, and you work in small crews, and electrical line work is the same deal. So I'm like, if I can do that for my main source of income and referee on the side when I have availability, that's a lot of checks in the plus column. Right? Yeah.
Right.
So that's a very short and condensed bit of 15 years of my life. Right now I'm on the up and up, which is great. But I do continue to do a lot of work in what I do with mental agility at my website, mentallyagile.com, where I use it as continuing therapy for me. It's kind of like a public journal in that sense, but I explore techniques and different therapeutic modalities and teach people about, cognitive distortions and what they are, and saying that even though you may not have depression or bipolar disorder or psychosis or schizophrenia, however, we all have brains.
Right.
And I've tested a lot of these techniques to a fairly extreme level. And so I say that if these things can work for me, then they can probably bring a great deal of value to people's quality of life, or somebody's child's quality of life as well.
Yeah. So I could easily end this interview right now if I wanted to. But I got a few questions to ask. So let's take it back to early childhood. So do you remember your exact first suicidal thought, or when you started realizing that you might have had a problem?
Yes, and I didn't realize it was a problem. So it was the summer before my senior year of high school. And so you got to understand how my mind works, and my personality is I'm very much a planner and organizer. When my dad took me to, like father son to work day, and he worked at SunTrust Robinson Humphrey, I would clean the office supply cabinet. Like, that's how much of a little organized nerdy kid I was. Right. I have to plan stuff out. Things need to be in order. So I planned out what was going to be my first attempt at suicide. the summer before my senior year. And then I just said, I was like, I have my plan. Now I'm just going to wait for the sign that means that I need to carry this out, that all of my thoughts are leading me to the conclusion that not that life isn't worth living, but that my life isn't worth anything more from now. I was looking for a moment that was going to say, you definitely need to end your life by suicide. And that moment came. So I was living with that thought and that plan until about April of 2006. And then eventually a moment happened that got me into that mindset. And a friend pulled me out of that.
Yeah. So I don't want to use the word weird. So there wasn't any depression leading up to that?
Oh no, there was, however, so back to my point of not realizing that I had a problem. So this
Mm-hmm.
is another big part of why I do these types of interviews, why I do my work with mental agility, why I speak to high schools and high school students especially, is I didn't know what I didn't know. Right? I was stumbling through the dark in my own head, but also through a significant gap in knowledge. Right? My understanding, I made a very bad assumption. I assumed that all these negative thoughts that I was having, all these thoughts of wanting to harm myself, of not wanting to be here anymore, of not being able to handle the most basic things in life, I thought that was the natural consequence of adulthood. I thought that everybody else around me, all of my peers, all of my teachers, my family, every adult that I knew was dealing with the exact same horrific and terrifying thoughts as I was,
Mm-hmm.
except they clearly had found a way or multiple ways to deal with it way better than I was because I was barely hanging on.
Yeah.
So there was a significant shame component to it where I was like, they're all dealing with this just fine. And this is all I have to look forward to. And I can't admit that I feel like I'm having a problem because I assumed everyone else was having the same problem and they were just clearly more well off than I was with it. So that assumption was an extraordinarily dangerous one, and one of the reasons why I do a lot of educational work and I love the term consciousness raising of what mental health really is,
Yeah.
but also recognizing that there are some thoughts that are so far outside the extreme that you need to be able to recognize those and request help and see that there's a way out of this, that you do not have to continue living with this experience.
Right. And so we're about the same age. And I remember growing up, you would hear that people are depressed or that they're suicidal or something like that. And the time frame that we both grew up in, I mean, let's be honest. The reason why a lot of people won't speak up because they don't want to be seen as like the weaker person.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you seem weak if you openly admit that you're depressed and stuff like that. Because I was always told to man up whenever I was
Sure.
feeling down or something like that. I don't think I ever had suicidal thoughts or anything like that. You never know because some people handle things differently. Or maybe I diverted it with something else, playing sports and stuff growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting too, because you played lacrosse
Mm-hmm.
basically your whole life growing up, right?
Yep.
Usually people would channel their stress or whatever they're going through something intensive. Like I've never played lacrosse, but it's a hard game from what I know. It takes a lot of coordination and everything to play that sport. Have you ever played lacrosse before?
I have not.
Yeah, I tried one time. I'd say that lasts about 5 minutes. Like, okay, I can't. I'm not getting this down.
I can't throw anything straight without a lacrosse stick.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, I can, but I'm more accurate with the lacrosse stick for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so it's two things that you alluded to on there. One is this kind of again, this man up mentality, this be strong, this caricature of a providing male, which is very inherent, certainly in Western cultures, but I think more prevalent in American cultures of what
Mhm.
that is. Lace up your bootstraps and go,
Yeah.
and everybody. Never realizes that it's physically impossible to pull up from your bootstraps. That I don't know how that's an actual thing, but it bugs me. But it's one of those things of just like it's a saying that makes absolutely no sense, but everybody understands what it means, and it's like rub some dirt on it, tough it out, and go.
Yeah.
And for somebody in a serious depression like I was, and I received those comments as I was getting a little bit more open with what it was I was dealing with. It's just not a helpful comment, those types of things. and it does no good and just further shames people. And the bigger issue with that, at least on the men's side here, is research has bared out that men are at a higher risk for ending their life by suicide because they choose more lethal means to do it.
Mm.
Women in general will attempt more often than men because they will choose, something where that is less lethal initially, or provides more time, like an overdose, to be discovered or to realize, like, oh, what did I just go do, and go to the hospital kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Men, and I have experience on this front, will choose a handgun, will step in front of a train, will jump off a tall enough building, and there's no coming back from those things, right?
Right.
So that's where the risk is on the men's side, is this idea to, and I talk about it when I do my mental agility workshops with coaches, specifically sports coaches. And I
Mm.
say, look, I love mental toughness. I love it. I love grit. I love perseverance. It has gotten me through a lot on the field, as a referee, as a player, and in life. However, I don't agree with coaching only mental toughness to young kids, high schoolers, even to some degree college students, because it assumes that they know what they're doing with a problem, and they don't. Right? I've never been able to tell a kid who's 9 years old to put their head down and figure it out, and have them figure it out amidst the stress of a game. It just doesn't happen that way.
Mm.
So I challenge that, and mental agility, in my mind, is a component now to mental toughness. Is it's an add-on, an added that makes things better on both sides. Is its strategy. It's
Mm.
saying that you can look at something and take a moment to step back and see what's the best way around, under, over, through. You don't always have to go through the problem. There are multiple avenues to get around that thing. It may be recruiting a buddy to help you, launch you over the obstacle.
Yeah.
It's not something that's entirely on you. And it's something where if you can take a moment and be intentional about how you're moving your mind and your thoughts, whether that's against your internal negative thoughts like I have, or if it's, towards something that you're aspiring to, you drastically increase the likelihood of you being successful. And in the mental health world of that, that's why I speak more to mental agility here. Is I want to be able to just like my old instructor in kickboxing, which is what I also did growing up, that in jiu-jitsu. He would punch me in the face in sparring when I was 16, right? Punch me in the face, and I would stand there, and I was obsessed with getting the perfect counter or the perfect block. And he punched me in the face again, and he goes, "Gordon, are you ever going to move?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can do that? Whoa." And so he's like, "Yeah, Bob, go 6 inches to the left, and I don't hit you, but you can hit me. See how that works?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool. And so that's what, in my mind, what mental agility is. It's finding tools and techniques and
Mm.
strategies in which you can move the brain around a little bit, whether it's internal or external stressors, to be able to attack these problems from a more stable foundation and a better direction, where you're not trying to do that while getting punched in the face.
Right.
That's, to me, mental toughness is sometimes you're just going to keep getting punched in the face, and you got to deal with that and move. But we don't always have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the way that you put. Oh, I thought you were about to say something. Yeah. I love mental agility. I love the way that you put that. Did you coin that, by the way?
That's mine. I'm trademarking that sucker.
You better do it. You better do it soon.
I got that bit. Yeah. So it's I gotta put the paperwork in for that. But yeah,
I like
that
that.
one's all me.
Because when I hear mental toughness, like you said, I think of grit. I remember I played football in Texas growing up, and I remember we used to do these tackling drills. I used to hate tackling drills. Not that I would like. That's probably why I don't play football now. Because I was always the smallest person on the field for the most part. I was always the tallest, but I was always the smallest at the same time. And I used to get murked. Like every practice, I would get murked, right? And it was like you get knocked out and you get back up, and they tell you to keep going.
Yeah.
You can't go anymore. That's what I think about mental toughness. The mental part was me getting back up, knowing I'm about to get murked again, But that's not healthy, especially knowing what we know now that it's not healthy. So, yeah, I like that. And then in the military, we talk about mental toughness all the time. But I think if you're not onto something already, you're about to be on something pretty big with mental agility. And it's military might buy you into something because because like you said, with mental agility, when I hear that now, I think of so many different ways to handle certain mental stressors.
Mm-hmm.
Because even like we all naturally, I would assume because I do it, and I think Raven does it too. When we're going through some type of mental stress, we find certain ways to handle whatever kind of stress we're going through at the time.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things of, again, I'm a, you know, big believer in finding ways in which you can change your daily behaviors and the triggers that you have throughout your day so that you're more likely to make better decisions for your overall health, not just mental, not just physical, not just personal with, familial, and friends or whatnot. But there are so many avenues for you to be able to recognize poor thinking. And whether that may be because of a mental illness or just because you're in a cruddy situation, and that's where the brain goes.
Yeah.
And when I speak to this, especially to coaches, and I have to tell them on this end, I'm like, you can't talk and speak and expect your youth athletes. And I use youth for age 25 and below. I actually use youth because the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until about that range. Usually for women, men, I'll go to 30. Usually they typically have a more fully developed brain by that age far sooner than the males do, which I think bears out in most anecdotal experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I tell them, I'm just like, you can't speak to anybody really under 25 and expecting them to think like an adult, to think like you, and to be able to handle stress like you. They haven't had enough stressful experiences, number one, to learn how to be able to balance those things out with more positive self-talk or other means in which to be able to cancel out those negative thoughts coming in. So that's one bit. But then the other bit that I talk to coaches about is recognizing that, a lot of them will say like, hey, I feel like a coach and a counselor at the same time right now because all their kids are so freaking wound up from all the pressures that are getting put on them externally and now internally. And they all have Facebook pages and Instagram stuff to maintain and keep up that visual, right, to all their friends or whatnot. And I tell them, it's just like, you got to look from an evolutionary psychology point of view, which is probably my like second favorite thing to dive into, is that, and I love to teach on this one, is we only have one stress response. We don't have a different stress response for school, for work, for arguing with your partner. We have one stress response, and it just manifests in different ways. And if we can find a way to get around that or to work with it, we're likely to be able to decrease our stress across just about every avenue of life. And the reason being for that is, again, you go back to our cave person days, right? Our ancestors. And we, something I remind folks, we evolved from the victors. Those we evolved from the people that stayed alive.
Right.
And the likelihood of me as a cave person walking through, the Sahara on the African plains and going, I hear a rustling in the bushes, right? It behooves me to imagine the most negative consequence possible, that there is a lion or a tiger there that wants to make me dinner.
Right.
If I assume that and take those precautions, 99 times out of 100, there's not a lion or tiger there, but nothing bad happens to me in those 99 times, right? I'm still alive, I'm cool, but I'm prepared if that one time the tiger is there. If I go the other direction with it and always assume that the rustling in the bushes is just wind, I'm going to be dinner. I'm not passing on my genes. I have no progeny, right? No descendants. Yeah. So because we evolved from the victors, we have that bit where the human brain naturally goes to negative explanations for things. And we have to be able to recognize that and work with that and realize that we have not that life is easier for us or was easier for our cave person ancestors, because that does not give them credit. They lived in a brutal time. Yeah. And however, our stress responses evolved for like a minute of terror. Run away from the threat, fight and defeat the threat, and then the threat is over, right? Zebras don't get stressed. That's a great book, by the way, by a guy named Robert Sapolsky. So zebras don't get ulcers. Zebras don't get ulcers. They don't get stressed, even though they're constantly worried about, tigers and cheetahs and whatnot.
Okay.
They're not constantly in that fight or flight response. Once they're done fleeing, they're done. They go back to munching on grass or taking care of the little ones.
Really? I would have never thought that with zebras.
That's the thought. Like they don't get ulcers because once they're done with the threat, it's back to status quo. But for us, and I tell folks, we have a tiger or a threat in our pocket, in our phone, with all the notifications that it brings, with every work call that we may have, with every potential argument with the people we care about, or whatever, even just if we get rear-ended one day, and that's another stress, and all those build. And we don't have an evolutionary adaptation for chronic stress. And so that's where all these techniques are coming from, and where I humbly put mental agility as an avenue for people to be able to work with the stress response that we evolved and all have to deal with, but give a modern spin on some of the techniques that we can do to live a little bit more easily.
Okay. So with children that you deal with now, what are the common stresses that you're hearing from them? Because they live in this world where it's hard. They can't shut off like we used to be able to shut off.
Mm-hmm.
They're always on. They always have access to, what's the word? Bullies, I guess you can use that word, or
Mm-hmm.
people that, I guess, threats. We can say that they always have access to threats, and they have access to so much information. So what are common stresses that you see with them that we maybe not have seen during our time frame as a
So
child?
this is, yeah. So I'm glad you and I are in the same kind of cohort age wise, and the latter stage millennials. Is that kind of like what we are? We just kind of like missed the
I don't
curve for Gen
I don't
Z or
know.
whatever.
Yeah, we're in
I'm
a
pretty
weird
sure I'm a millennial
situation.
on that front. Yeah, but
Yeah, I think we're millennial. I'm 30, and yeah, we're both 30. So you're 30. So we're about 2 years
yeah.
apart.
So the weird thing on that front is we still remember the time when you had dial-up internet, and we had that
Right.
awful sound, and nobody could call the house, and you had parents would put limits on that, and you could only use
Yep.
it for so long. And then we were the first generation to get smartphones, and I don't think
Mhm.
Facebook came out for me until my senior year of high school, freshman year of college. And even then, it was still pretty limited and couldn't do all the things it did now. And Instagram wasn't even a thing, right? So
Yeah.
all those things, we kind of grew into all that stuff as that technology was evolving. So it
Right.
wasn't as part of our day to day as it is for really any 9-year-old right now. And I've coached hundreds of them at this point.
That's wild.
And they're all tied into that. So we had kind of like a natural kind of like slowing down of that, where we could kind of see if we could blend this technology and this connection into our regular lives. Whereas, the kids who, were born, quite frankly, after 2000, they just get this dumped on them. Right. And when I speak to students now in high school, usually I tell them, I give you all a lot of credit because you all are the guinea pigs of a new age. It's not the technology. I don't say it's like, these are powerful tools, and they're useful tools, and they can be used for a lot of amazing things and to make our lives easier. That's the purpose of technology. Great. Cool. I'm all for it. Right. I'm a sci-fi nerd anyway. I love anything that's
Yeah.
going to be using cool science. I'm all for it.
Okay.
Right. What I see as the problem, and this is more after having dived into evolutionary psychology a lot, and also understanding the fact that we are social primates. Right? We can't get around that fact. We are social primates.
Right.
And I do this when I do, and I'll ask you all the same question I ask coaches because they're, again, trying to help them deal with the counselor part of their job now,
Mhm.
is we've just discovered fire as a species, right? Let's just say that's the newest technology. And I call the smartphone the fire of the next generation for this reason. It
Okay.
changes everything. We can now farm. We've got time. We've got control of life to some degree. And we are now the apex predator on the planet. Nothing can really threaten us, even though we still have that fight or flight response. As a group, we're probably okay as a species at this point,
Mhm.
right? So now we're living in bands of about 300 to 400 people, give or take, right, in these small communities. We no longer really have to worry about these external threats to our body, right? What do you guys think is the next biggest threat to our well-being in that scenario?
Would it be
Each
the?
other.
Yeah,
Okay.
bingo.
I was going to say the fire itself, but
Bingo. Yeah, it can be on that bit, but yeah. So you're looking on this bit of we've developed a little bit of control over these things that we didn't have control of before, that ran our lives, right? So again, but now we're in these groups of 300 to 400 about folks, right? These small communities, and people need to know who's trustworthy. People need to know who's a threat, who can take care of my kids while I'm out gathering or hunting.
Mhm.
Who is, as we got further into things and more developed society, who can lend me money and I agree, trust it'll get paid back, that kind of thing. So as we develop these more intense social environments, our brains had to adapt to that as well. And just going with the fact that we're social primates, we thrive on connection, but it also has to be a good sense of connection as well. What technology has done for us now is amazingly connect the globe in an extraordinarily short period of time. But imagine if you're a cave person, right? And all you had to deal about was 300, 400 people. I'll ask you on this one, in your sporting life, right? who did you compare yourself the most often to among your peers? Like, did you have was there like a top guy or two in your region that was like, that's the guy to emulate and be?
Yeah. So I was playing football growing up, and I was I was a big fan of Jerome Bettis. I don't know if you know who that
Yeah.
is. Okay,
Oh
cool.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He was a running back for the Steelers, so I was somebody who I looked up to because I was a chunky kid too.
Yeah.
So I want to be
And
like him, but that's not necessarily in my school. I didn't care for being like any of those guys.
all right, that's fair. Well, here's the thing where I'm going through on with this point is imagine if we take a kid, right, from our cave person times, right, who's expecting 300 to 400 people roundabout, right? You know everybody in that group to some degree, close or not, you kind of know all that, right? You have some people that you can look to for leadership or things that you want to emulate or behaviors you want to go ahead and follow with, but that's a pretty contained group, right? That's a reasonable amount of connection for folks. Now take that person and put them in a city of 9 million and see if they don't lose their freaking mind with the amount of people that are there. We don't have the mental capacity to deal with that many opinions, number one, that many people looking at us, that many folks asking us how we're doing, that many expectations, or the fact that you had that one, you've Jerome Bet, that one guy to look at. Imagine now having 100 of those possibilities now that every kid can look at every Instagram page of every NFL running back possible.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, I can I really be that guy? Or is there now a couple thousand people who are all raring to be that guy and the math isn't working out for that anymore? And it's an over connection that our brains, in my opinion, are frankly not evolved for. And that is where the friction I feel is coming in for young people, especially, is that they've got minds that are best adapted for a couple hundred folks at most over the course of their life.
Right.
And before they're in middle school or right about, they're given a device that can connect them to 7 billion other people.
Mm-hmm.
And typically the loudest of those 7 billion people as well, which is a whole nother problem.
Yeah.
That is an overwhelming thing in and of itself. And then we wonder, we add that and the competition with those other individuals, indirect or directly, on top of family and parental expectations, school expectations, am I going to get a good job expectations, all those kind of things. And I just see these kids wound so freaking tight because they feel they've got to do everything, but also be so good at everything. Not being good at something with the kids I talk to is a foreign idea.
Yeah.
They don't want to be able to do that, and it really screws with their self-esteem, their overall mental health, and their quality of life.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because now they live in a society where everyone's showing their highlights of their life. Especially with the Instagram app or Facebook, I guess. I don't even know if people use Facebook like that anymore. But people are only showing their highlights. They're not showing their everyday life when it comes to putting everything on display. So it makes sense to why they have that mentality of they must be good at something or they must be good at everything, And that's not. It could be a good thing for some people, but that's not that's not a normal way of thinking.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where I don't think in this case we really give kids, and this is why I tell them, I give them a lot of credit when I speak in front of them. I'm going to say, you all are living this experience, and nobody, least of all me, knows what it's going to happen to a developing mind in these formative years with this degree of connection that is more exponential than any other human being has ever had in any time of history.
Yeah.
And say, I'll give you credit for just treading water right now. Because I'm in awe of you all, because the fact that you are even going to school and getting up in the morning and even trying to do things is amazing to me. Because if I had all this stuff that I also had to keep up with 15 years ago, I don't think I make it. I really don't. I think I lose my mind in that space. I really do.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know, and I don't want to know. For me,
yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's so. I'm glad that you're doing the work that you're doing, getting out and talk to the younger people, because we didn't have that, because it was a stigma. So you're out there trying to destigmatize that, and I appreciate that. And we don't have kids, but I'm assuming by the time we have kids, they'll have courses like mental health courses or mental agility courses, maybe. That's
Hey, that'd be freaking awesome. I would love that. And I tell
yeah.
folks, I'm just like, part of me is just, is a little bit pissed off in that, again, when I was younger, I didn't know what I didn't know. Neither did my family or my
Mhm.
close friends. So there was no way for me to get help even at the earliest stage when help would have done the most good. Right.
Yeah.
I got help when things were dire, and could have gone either way, for my life or the end of it. And now it's sitting here just like, and again, one of those things of, I learned a lot of facts, and I was pressured to go to college to learn a lot of things that I could have learned at the exact same time for a lot less money at a local community college. That never an option for me. But
Yeah.
also I'm just like, no one ever, as far as the same bit of yeah, my folks taught me to had a budget checkbook, but nobody really taught me about credit cards. Nobody really taught me about this internal dialogue that everybody has with themselves, and the fact that there are things, this is why when I talk to folks, they're like, this feels like common sense and life skills. And I'm like, yeah, but the only people learning these things in our generation and the upcoming generation are people who have been to therapy.
Yeah.
And it's a stunning to me that that's where we're at, and why a big part of why I do what I do now is because I want to enhance the conversation. And I also want to take these things out of this bit of just saying, like, you have to be mentally ill to learn about cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm like, no, you have a brain. This stuff will work for you.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff to know. I saw somewhere that you had like techniques that you use to hack your mind.
Yeah, yeah. It's any specific questions on there? You kind of want me to dive in with what I got in mind?
Um, in general, what do you mean by hacking your mind?
Yeah, so
Really
it's one of
broad. I'm
the
sorry.
yeah, no, it's one of the things of, whether I like it or not, I'm a part of the wellness industry, and there are all sorts of unfortunate woo-woo and hack mind things and align chakras and all that kind of stuff there. And
Yeah.
and I'm a fan of language and using it as specifically as possible. Hack your mind still seems to me, since we're all know those terms, it kind of works, but we're not drastically reprogramming the brain here. Like, that's not what's happening. We're
Mhm.
using some tools that can have a measurable effect, and has been demonstrated by research, by science, to have physiological effects on the body, and has effects from reported effects now from folks who say that this helped X, Y, and Z in my thinking patterns. Right. So when I say, my mother's a carpenter, learned that from my grandfather. And so I have tools in my mental health toolkit. That's on
Okay.
my website, mentallyagile.com. There are tools for high school students, tools for working professionals, and tools for referees, because of course, and I'm
Okay.
building out more toolboxes as I can, the things that I think are good for those particular populations. Right. And probably the biggest one, the one I default to the most, or I use the most in my day to day, is just breath work. And there are some fascinating things, research on breath work. There's a gentleman named Max Strom, who really introduced me to that. It's I want to be going to one of his seminars at one point, but it's a way to engage the parasympathetic response or the relaxation response.
Mhm.
And I always tell folks, I had trouble remembering between sympathetic and parasympathetic, which was which. Sympathetic being fight or flight. That's a tiger just burst into your room.
Sympathetic.
Parasympathetic is your relaxation. That's you're on the beach with a cocktail. You don't have a care in the world. You can think long term. You are relaxed. So my goal with all my tools is to take you from a tiger being burst into a room and you're threatened to on the beach with a cocktail mentally.
Yeah.
That's where we're trying to go on that front. And there's a whole range of things inside of that. But breath work for me has been the one that shows the most consistent return, for the least amount of effort, really. So
He
there
said
are
that's
great.
called para. What'd you call it?
So it's the parasympathetic nervous system.
Parasympathetic.
That's your relaxation response.
Oh, that's a word.
Yeah,
Wow.
the whole thing. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
I've never heard that. Have you heard that before? Oh, well, I
Yeah.
guess I'm the only idiot on this show.
Yeah, so that's your relaxation response. But the useful thing on this one, and this is why I kind of like saying it as a hack or still as a tool, is that it's an on-off switch. You're either on your sympathetic nervous system or you're on your parasympathetic nervous system. If you can engage one, it turns the other off. So even if you do that for a little bit, you're a little bit more relaxed, and even if you flip back to the stress side of things. So even a little bit can help you, then think more clearly and have the likelihood of making better decisions. But breath work for me, especially because I have a history of panic attacks. I had one this past Tuesday,
Mhm.
and it's been about 2-3 months since I had the last one. So they're terrible when they come in. But I've had enough awareness of my panic attacks. I can kind of see them coming, and I can decrease how bad they're going to be by doing breath work, by doing deep belly, diaphragmatic breathing, things that open up the low belly. In yoga, they call it pranayamic breathing.
Mm-hmm.
But all it is deep breathing and controlled. And the only real rule to follow is that your exhales need to be longer than your inhales.
Yeah.
That's it. So for me, I typically do an inhale count of 4 and an exhale count of 6. And if I'm feeling particularly stressed, I will slow that down even further to inhaling for a count of 4, holding full for a count of 4, exhaling for a count of 6, and holding empty for a count of 6, and just repeating that. And usually have my eyes closed, or I'm listening to a guided meditation, something that'll calm me down, calming music, right? I'm not playing Metallica while trying to do this breath work. I'm staying pretty chill. I'm working on that. And that usually for me is enough to take the biggest edge off that panic attack, whatever anxiety I may be feeling. I also do the same thing when I referee. So before I go into a stressful situation, when the national anthem is playing and I'm standing there with my crew, I've got my eyes closed and I am saying my mantras to get my mind right. So I'm saying focus, 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 and have fun. That's one of my common mantras when I referee, because I get paid to focus, but I also want to have a good time. And at the same time, I'm doing belly breathing, circle breathing, box breathing, whatever you want to call it, while that national anthem is going on. So I got about a 2-minute period where nobody's bugging me for anything, that I can do that, and then I can step into the lineup and the first face-off of the game in a fairly relaxed mindset. And after doing that, habituating myself to that for a while, it's much easier for me to slip into that relaxed state of mind. So I highly recommend like 3 rounds of deep belly breathing before you turn the ignition on in your car. You'll be amazed at how much easier your drive is wherever you're going. So another way to, again, these are things that are small daily activities you can do that accrue over time and lead to significant gains. Okay.
You know what I was thinking when he was saying that, his panic attacks?
Huh.
Yeah, because I used to, so I guess we don't travel as much nowadays, but before, I guess last year, I've traveled my whole life, but within probably like the past 10 years, I've been having these random panic attacks, and they come out of nowhere. And I guess I naturally try to control my breathing, but sometimes I can't grasp a hold of it, and I like freak out. I haven't freaked out with you yet, I don't think I freaked out.
Not freaked out, but we were on a plane.
Yeah.
I think it's happened twice on the plane.
They usually only happen on the plane, but they happen in the back of a classroom before. I remember that. I was in some class or something. I remember freaking out in the back of the class, but all I did was put my head down and just started sweating and losing my mind. But I didn't want to bring attention to myself. So I probably could have died back there and I didn't know what I know now. But yeah, like, I guess I naturally did the breathing thing, try to get control of it, but not in a systematic way like you just explained it.
Well, so that one takes, and this is not something you can probably do in the back of the classroom. You'd have to excuse yourself to go and do. But so I like breath work because we're always breathing. It's always there. It's for the most part always under our control if we're diligent about it, right? So that's always a tool that's available to me. If I've run out of every other tool, I have that one there, right? Yeah. But then there's another again benefit to being a primate and a mammal, especially, is there's a cool thing called the mammalian dive reflex. And this, I'll tie this into the panic attacks and the anxiety and the shortness of breath here in a minute.
Okay.
But for me, when I'm feeling panicked in that sense, my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up, my breath gets shorter, my face gets flushed. You have those same kind of feelings there, right? You tense all over.
Yeah.
Right. Fairly, common physiological response to fear. Okay, fine. So the mammalian dive reflex is something that we are born with by virtue of being mammals. Awesome. And we can utilize that. So this is something that doesn't even require conscious thought. All it requires is cold water. So you can do this one of 3 ways, really. Probably most effective, full cold water immersion. I don't have a giant enough bathtub to do that. And I also can't do that when I'm at like a conference or that's not always available to me, right? I don't have a pool that's 50 degrees I can dive into, right? So not always an option, but that's highest. I'm working my way down here.
Okay.
Second option, get a large bowl, fill it with cold water, ice water, a little bit of ice cubes in there as well. It's got to be cold. Mm-hmm. take a deep breath and hold your face in that water so that your orbital bones, there's some nerves in there that are important here. I don't know the biology for it, just know those nerves are in there. And if you keep yourself submerged for about 30 seconds, you're going to engage the mammalian dive reflex. Every mammal has that. When they're submerged under cold water, the brain recognizes that the body is underwater and can't breathe. So it's trying to make it more likely for you to get to a point where you have oxygen again. So it lowers the heart rate. It starts shutting down, not shutting down, but slowing down your metabolism, all your non-essential organs on that front, and really bringing your heart rate and everything down to extend the amount of time that you have with your last breath of oxygen, right? It does this automatically. So this is not a thought process you have to go through. And I've done this with a heart rate monitor on and just watched as it came up, like, and come down. I'm 20, 30 beats below where I started with 30 seconds ago. The other option for this one, the lightest method that you can do, but still effective, and one that I still frequently use, is you can put a cold pack or a cold bottle of water, again, on your orbital bones for about 30 seconds to a minute, or on your wrists where the skin is thinnest, and allow that cold blood to circulate through your body a couple of times. You can do that as well. It's still, again, in the top to bottom, this is going to be the most effective bit for that, and that's going to be the least amount of effect that you'll see. But it's one of those things there, you don't have to think about it. If you're feeling your heart rate getting up, you can use the mammalian dive reflex to use the benefit of your evolved physiology to bring your heart rate down, bring your stress levels down, and trip that relaxation response, and then make better decisions going forward.
Okay. Now I know. So if you hear the tub going late at night and you're allowed splash, it's probably because I'm having a panic attack again or something. That's pretty interesting. I'm definitely gonna try that, especially whenever you're traveling. I guess you can get a cold pack or a ice cold bottle of water.
Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah,
give it a feel.
I will, literally.
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like you already answered this question, but what is something that you do every day that you consider therapeutic?
Ooh.
We ask all our guests.
I connect with people, and so the biggest factor for me is again, you have to understand this bit. As a depressive and as someone who has a history of suicidal ideation, right? I will forever be at risk of being in that space again, right? My history doesn't allow me to think I'm over this entirely, and when I'm in those spaces, I don't make the best decisions. Right. So I can do all the preventative work I want, but sometimes life is going to happen and the disease gets a vote too. Right. So I have to respect that fact. Because of that, other people in my social support network, my immediate family, probably my sister at the biggest bit, some very close friends of mine through the lacrosse community and the refereeing community, and then wider now is the people who follow me on different social media stuff and read my stuff and interact with me on that end, send me emails and whatnot. I have different levels of connectedness to other human beings that I can leverage for the rest of my life, that somebody may notice me going a little bit sideways in things. If I'm not posting regularly, if I go 2 weeks without a new blog post, someone's going to be like, "Hey, is everything okay? Notice you haven't," and I could be like, "Oh yeah, I've just been real busy with work." And but that's a check-in that I wouldn't have otherwise. My sister and I constantly ask one another, because we deal with some of the same issues, her more on the panic side, of genuine check-ins of how we're doing. How's your mental state? What's anything stressing you out lately? How are you dealing with things? Are you still taking your medication? Those things there. And the difference is, for me at 32 versus me in my early 20s, is having these honest conversations with the people I care about and that I know care about me, and they know what I'm like when I'm depressed. They know what I'm like when I'm in those serious situations, and they can see that sometimes far more readily than I can.
Mm-hmm.
And I've given them permission to say, like, "Hey, if you ask me how I am and I say I'm fine or I'm all right, you have permission to keep asking that question until I give you a real answer." And that's what they're there for. And so the wider and deeper social net that I have to support myself is something I've developed over many years, will continue to develop and strengthen, And that's not only just good for my own long-term survival, but that's just another, the plus on that is we're social creatures, and my life has been enhanced by the quality of connections that I have with the people I care about. And that is what I do every single day. I've got my favorites list on my phone of about 10 people. I'm calling one of them over the course of that day. And by the time the week is over, then we reset and do that again. And then I've got all the connections I have with people from former coworkers, from referees, to now what I do with mental agility, where I get a lot of people checking in on me, and I have my depression has nowhere to hide from me or from anybody else. So
that's good. I'm glad you said that too, because a lot of people don't have the same research you have, and they need to reach out to people, because depression, I guess you could hide if you don't have those connections. So I appreciate that. Any plugs or anything that you'd like to give? I know you have the Mental Agility podcast or Mental Agility website.
Yeah, so my website is mentallyagile.com. So you can find me there, or you just Google Mental Agility, it'll pop right up. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search Mental Agility or Mentally Agile. And I'm on LinkedIn as Gordon Corsetti, just on my professional side of things. But I have usually a bi-weekly newsletter that may turn into a monthly newsletter once I get back to work here. So I've got that on my website if folks want to stay up to date on things that are going around. And I also offer virtual coaching sessions, workshops for teams, be it sports teams, coaches, so coaching groups, schools as well, any organization that is looking to find a way for people, especially in the age of COVID, to deal with stress more effectively. And that's where I'm coming into that. So I offer those workshops, and folks can get in touch with me on my site or through any other avenue if they're interested in those. Okay,
cool. I'll plug all that into the description of the podcast. Raymond,
awesome.
Nope.
She's just my lovely co-host,
There we go.
But you don't like the word co-host. My bad. She's the lovely the other host. Okay.
There we go.
Like I said again, I do applaud you for everything that you do, all the work that you're doing out there, especially for the younger generation. We didn't have, like I said earlier, we didn't have that growing up. You're a great advocate for it, I feel, and mental agility. I love that word. Like I said, I can't wait till you trademark it, and I can't wait to see your face on top of that word. Be like, I had him on our podcast, back then. So that'd be pretty cool. So, do you have anything that you want to ask or anything?
No, just once again, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate getting to speak with both of you and to reach y'all's audience.
All right. Appreciate that. All right. It's been another episode of Puppet Therapy Podcast with your host, Chris.
Right.
And today we have with us Gordon Corsetti. I love that last name. All right, sir. You have a good one.
Y'all as well. Take care.
Enjoy yourself. Bye.
Bye.